me start by saying that I'm going to read probably about 7 poems. Most of them are short, some are a little longer. Let me start by saying something about the cover. The cover of Outside the Lines is my mother's hand in my hand a year before she died of COVID. And I don't know what possessed me, but I was comforting her, holding her hand, and I just took my cell phone and went click. And then when we were thinking about the cover for this book, and I saw all the incredible lines in my mother's hand, I thought that was an incredible metaphor for her and our relationship and all this. So I sent the photograph to our son Simon Peterson, who is a photo editor of a magazine in Montana. And I said, can you turn this into black and white and maybe highlight the lines in the hands? And he did that and couldn't be more pleased with it. The first poem actually in the book is called Outside the Lines. And I wrote this to try to come to grips with my relationship with my mother. Hi, welcome. Come join us. There's seats wherever. It really follows right from the cover. So I'll read that first, just because it kind of introduces you a little bit to me and who I am. My mother took me by the hand and led me down her path. My father followed right behind, cheering all the way. I skipped along with pep in my step, never incurring any family wrath. It was all so fun and easy, agreeing to everything they'd say. I'd be the family lawyer, pinned up with a tie and smoking pipe. I'd be wise, I'd advise. With a broad smile, I would lead. Oh, bountiful life when one fits comfortably within another's dream. Money and respect would pour in, fittingly filling the family need. But when I went away, something spoke softly in my ear when none of us was looking. Whispers from Wordsworth, Ibsen, and Thoreau, and I became the fish for their hooking. Afterwards, nothing was the same. My parents' path to me became odious as I was secreted away by new dreams of teaching and art making. Do them on the side, my mother decreed, and never as a living. The soft-spoken call of the soul found no place in their thinking. Rejecting their path shattered their dreams and left a festering wound, never to be closed, never to be healed. To them I had veered off course, had careened to the far outside, had become a driverless car, unwheeled and spinning, and in revenge they planted in me a half-smiling, sniveling critic against whose doubts I had little hope of winning. But I worked to ignore him, slowly accruing faith in a never familiar, ever fading voice wherever it would lead, whether to confusion, torment, or rejoice. For my second poem, this is dedicated to Pancho Burke. So, hi Belinda, welcome. Please find a seat wherever. This is called Two Gifts, and I love parables. I love parables in the Bible. I love them outside of the Bible, and I decided to write a parable about these two gifts. So I'll read it. It's the only parable I ever wrote, so I'm happy to share it. God looked over the world and seeing the need, bestowed on us humans two gifts. One was the capacity to believe, the other the capacity to doubt. With the first, the one to believe, he was asking us to trust in the great mysteries, sensing that the highest truths were beyond what reason and senses could behold. The second gift, to doubt, involved questioning, testing assumptions, using critical thinking as a check against things veering toward the irrational or the extreme. God knew that most of us would be predisposed more toward one than the other, and that, he thought, would be okay. A lot of doubt and a little belief, or a lot of belief and a little doubt, or pocketing one for now, the one not needed today, knowing how things might change tomorrow. The assumption was we'd always keep both in play, struggle with both, juggle both, dance with both, or work with one and keep the other for another day. He knew how some believers would toss their belief high in the night sky to catch the bright light of a shining moon, while others would keep it hidden, an unseen coal glowing near the heart. And how some doubters might strut around, intellects blazing left and right, while others would question quietly under the breath, mumbling that all this believing was bogus, a mere blind fumbling. But they too would keep the belief card close to the chest, he assumed, ready to play at the table once the other players forced them to display. He assumed that none of us doubters and believers alike would even think to pit one precious gift against the other, that we'd never even consider dropping one entirely despite discomforting contradictions. He trusted that we trusted that there was a reason for both, that the gifts would not have been bestowed lightly, that they were both bestowed divinely, therefore important and necessary. But somehow that didn't stop us from clinging to one and excluding the other, becoming blind believers who wouldn't question anything, or stubborn skeptics who had to question everything. And how so many of us would ignore the issue altogether, not bothering to believe or question, content to satisfy urges and just accumulate. So God, looking down over his good and beautiful world, seeing little struggling, little juggling, little dancing with the two gifts, two old relics forgotten on a sad, neglected shelf. And God was bewildered, took it to heart, shook his head, wondering how he could have misjudged us so badly. He turned to the two dusty clumps of clay beside him and wondering whether it was time to start molding all over again. The third one has a bit of a story behind it. It's called The Night Watchman. And it takes place on, actually, I have to go back now to when I graduated high school, just before I started college. I was doing construction work in Carteret, New Jersey, which was just over the bridge from Brooklyn. And so the family decided that I would stay over at my grandmother's house, Grandma Beatrice Feinsod, and that's who I dedicated this poem to. My grandmother was an amazing woman, beautiful woman, had just a wonderful spirit. And it was great because I had a whole summer to live with her, and then I'd go do the construction work, go back to Brooklyn, sleep there, and then on the weekend I'd go back to Roslyn where my parents were. My grandmother always woke up at 4 a.m. She was one of those very early risers, which unfortunately it's a gene that I inherited. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, she would just pace back and forth and always checking in on me. So anyway, I wrote a poem about this. But another part of the history of this poem is I started it when I was in high school. And I sent it to my math teacher. It was this wonderful woman, Bonnie Kelterborn, wonderful math teacher. And she loved the fact that I wrote poetry, so she asked me to send her the poetry. And I sent her this poem. I don't remember anything but the first stanza. And I decided I would start this stanza, now that I'm writing at a much older age, that I'd start with that stanza that I remembered from high school and go from there and just see what happens. And so the first stanza, which I repeat at the end also, was written when I was in high school. Night watchman you guard, night watchman you love, you pace to preserve in the lonely dark. I remember back 50 years plus to Grandma pacing, those creaks in the floor. It's 4 before dawn, she walks past the door. I could see her now peeking in again and again to make quite sure that I was secure. That constant checking made no sense back then. What could have changed between me at 4 and me at 4:10? Now I wake up and I pace at 4, Jean's late to sprout. Her soft step then is my heavy step now. I look in on my flat-out sleeping stray, on the shaggy green blanket between him and the floor, his first bed, I'm sure. When I first saw him, he was filthy and slim from a life of retreat, but now, thank God, he's safe from the street. Peeking in is what I do now. Again and again, I peer in, cautious and hushed, to protect his repose. Some reliefs never close. Back then, did Grandma sense the stray I was beneath my appearance and my show? Lost teen, restless, stalked, fleeing dangers to my baffled soul? Night watchman you guard, night watchman you love, you pace to preserve in the lonely dark. Well, the next one actually has a picture attached to it, and the picture is in the book. Mary, my wife Mary, found this picture. We're going through some old black and whites, actually looking through my father's pictures of my father in the military, and we came upon this picture of me at the age of 4 with my Uncle Jack. And this, I had a very strong emotional reaction to this because I had never seen a picture between me and my Uncle Jack. He died when I was 10 years old. He had a huge influence on me. And I figured there was never a picture of us together. So anyway, seeing this picture made me write this poem. So I'd like to read this poem. It's called Finding Uncle Jack. There was a hole in my life I hardly knew was there. I grew up in a community of manicured lawns, of houses still too large for the plots they sat in, of Cadillacs galore, of streets with no walking paths since no one would ever bother to walk on them. Houses filled with too many rooms for one small family and many bathrooms, with walls coated in paper-thin mirrors, living rooms with prints of famous paintings, the colors off, unnoticed, pictures dying in gaudy, glamorous frames. And when you went down to the basement to breathe, you came on bookshelves lined with matching books, familiar titles, the classics, covers embossed in gold. But if you happened to open one up and look inside, you'd find the book completely hollow, as if the owner of that particular bulging house knew how no one would ever bother to open a book up, thus keeping the owner's learned pretense protected and intact. But then there was my Uncle Jack. He was my great uncle, actually, my grandfather's brother on my mother's side. I saw very little of him. He visited rarely, died when I was only 10. Jack had 4 brothers who ran the family business, a successful advertising firm on Madison Avenue. He rebelled, became a bohemian artist residing on an obscure side street in Greenwich Village. Never married, never had children. He was first to last a painter. He painted nothing experimental, nothing abstract. His art was quite traditional and happiest in oils, portraits, nudes, landscapes, and still lifes. He was often hired to tag along with the wealthy, accompanying them on luxury liners in travels to the Middle East, the Mediterranean, Asia, with the Huntingtons, the DuPonts, the other elite families. His was a free ride, and they'd pay him to paint the nearby harbors, ocean fronts, exotic strangers in unfamiliar outfits. He was to adorn their mansion walls with art from the trips. My family was happy to accept Jack's cast-offs, and beautiful cast-offs they were. Portraits and landscapes, people and coasts of far-off lands, gracing the walls of my youth in a house that otherwise lacked air. I have only 2 memories of my uncle. In the first, Jack never even appeared. I was 5. My mother announced he was coming over for dinner. Hearing the news, I ran and skipped through our small starter 2-family home singing, "Sailing, sailing over the bounty main, for many a stormy wind shall blow ere Jack comes home again." I don't remember his visit, though, not at all, just the anticipation, the running and skipping, the singing of the song I mislearned in kindergarten. I see it so vividly to this day, but nothing of the visit itself. The second is an incident 5 years later. By now we had moved and were living, dying, among gaudy house fronts in a development with streets unwelcoming for walking. One day, Mom announced I'd be playing the clarinet for the guests. I was often pressured to perform an instrument of one kind or another, or present a monologue from one type of play or another. This time it came without warning. I hadn't practiced at all, and I remember playing very badly. I made it through Clair de Lune, a simplified version. They applauded politely. They smiled. I smiled. I then walked out with as much dignity as I could muster, carrying clarinet in one hand, the case in the other. In my room, I cried briefly at having performed so poorly, hoping this would be the last time I'd ever be asked to perform again. In my room, I regained my composure, and while putting away the instrument, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Come in," I said, thinking it was Dad telling me to come out and say goodbye to the guests, who may have sought a fast exit in hopes of avoiding any more bad performances. But it wasn't my parents at all. It was my Uncle Jack. He entered, sat across from me, his face serious, his look intense. He uttered one sentence only, gesturing toward the clarinet case. "It's important that you're doing this." No one ever said anything like that to me before. No one ever bothered to visit me like that before. He didn't say my performance was good, because it wasn't. And I knew doing this didn't mean performing for guests. It meant making art. He knew it'd be hard to do that there. He said no more. He rose and left. I would never see him again. Over the years, I reflected on my uncle's visit to my room, his words returning many decades later as I taught theater, following my drummer and certainly not my family's. His words kept reminding me not to forget to say to my students that what they were doing was important, that making art is making meaning, wherever it goes, even if it goes nowhere, as if there were such a place for art not to go to. Intrinsic meaning, how making something from a deep part of yourself has meaning in and of itself, adds spirit energy to a universe that needs it. In a society that doesn't care whether you do it or not. If it's not going to go somewhere, don't bother. It's okay, just accumulate. Seek the smooth ride for others and yourself, because the art road is bumpy, lots of potholes, ultimately thankless, and it will likely leave you poor like it did Uncle Jack, who never had wealth, who never mattered to the New York Times. So why was I so excited to see Uncle Jack in that first memory of him when I was in my old house when I was 5? I couldn't recall any encounter with him before that. What propelled me around our little living room, skipping, laughing, and singing? Last week, my wife and I were sorting old grainy photos when she came upon one that puzzled her. She asked who this was. Oh my God. It was me at 4, with a thin, balding man, bright eyes behind black glasses, sitting, smiling to the camera in some backyard. I had no recollection of the occasion, but recognized the backyard behind my grandparents' home. They too were in the photo, behind, together, looking away. The candid was of me and a man resembling my grandfather, clearly his younger brother. We're both smiling, joyous. It is now the only photo I have of me with my Uncle Jack. There I am behind him, either about to climb on his back or dismounting from having just been there. His hands are reaching behind, holding me to make sure I wouldn't fall. You'd think you were seeing the quintessential happy father with his own happy child, but no, it was me with my Uncle Jack. I broke down crying seeing that photo. To my surprise, me, now myself an old man, crying for an uncle who died when I was 10, who has left me only 2 memories, 4 or 5 paintings that I've inherited, and 1 sentence. And now a tiny black and white photograph, small yet large. And why did seeing us together arouse so much emotion? This photo, large and looming, leading me to ask, how much does it take, or how little should suffice to fill a hole you hardly know is there? The joys of life wax and wane. The whole remains. So the next one is another kind of experiment. Frontier Poetry offers a contest. And it's this very special kind of contest. I never heard of this. It's called a hermit crab contest. And I didn't even know what it was, but I read about it. And what it is you write a poem in relation to something that's already published, and you put your poem in relation to it. It could be a part of a phone book or whatever, but you use that phone book, just like a hermit crab uses the shells of other creatures. It's a similar kind of thing. So at first I was very puzzled by this. What am I going to do? I didn't even know where to begin. But then I started thinking about it, and I started to just brainstorm with myself, and I came up with something. So I'd like to read this. I'd like to invite my goddaughter up to help me. Teresa Davis is going to read from the published part of it, and I will read my written part in relation to it. And then I'll say a word.
So the title is Beef Wellington, or Filet de Boeuf en croûte in Joy of Cooking, serves 12.
Oh yes.
If time is no object and your aim is to out-Jones the Joneses, you can serve this twice roasted but rare beef encased in puff paste.
Their Gazan apartment building explodes into fire, everything lost. Their 2 young children cannot stop screaming, but they must hurry before the next barrage. No time to comfort or explain. They drag their kids through the rubble. The couple place the small, frightened children on their donkey while they walk quickly alongside. The 4, fleeing into the blackest night, lit only by blaring bright flares they fear may expose them.
Double the recipe for puff paste or pâte feuilletée, which can be prepared the day before and reserved in the refrigerator. Preheat oven to 425 degrees.
They had no time to grab the little food they had, but where would they have stored it? The donkey packs were full with an extra set of clothes for each of them, and of course they had to take the Koran so they could travel with God. And Azza, the donkey, could carry only the saddle packs and the 2 children, young husband, young wife, walking briskly beside 2 tiny, frightened children, leaving their past lives behind for the blank of nothing ahead.
Rub with butter a 5-pound fillet of beef. Roast on a rack for 25 minutes or until the thermometer reads 120 degrees.
Their town in utter ruin, their friends and neighbors dead or gone. It is now just them. No chance or place for the pita to be baked, no yeast for its rising. Like the bread of the Israelites in the desert, forced to eat the bread unleavened to escape the mighty enemy's encroaching army.
Very rare. On taking meat from oven, you may flambe with 1/3 cup brandy. Let meat cool to room temperature.
When they finally arrive, exhausted and hungry in Rafah, where it was said they'd be safe, their older child dies of shrapnel while in his mother's arms. The father, looking on, his face twisted unrecognizably as he wails, with no family or neighbors left to share their grief. But amid new explosions, they must now leave Rafah too. With no place left to go, they still go on. Asa the donkey does not know why his load is lighter now.
Use any excess dough for decorations, which you can stick to the surface with more of the egg white. Brush exposed surfaces with French egg wash or dorure.
The second child contracts a disease, perhaps polio, but there's no vaccine, no doctor to administer anything. Mother and father realize that their only child left has died. She sags on Asa. The donkey shifts with instinctive compassion so the child cannot fall to the rocky ground. Couple continues. Despite unimaginable grief, as enemy soldiers and tanks appear from nowhere.
Allow to stand for 15 minutes before serving on a garnished platter. Carve with a very sharp knife into slices about 3/4 inch thick.
Is killing 200 innocent Gazans to go after one Hamas fighter under a Gaza building any different from the Nazis finding a Jew hiding in a Polish attic and slaughtering everybody inhabiting the same neighborhood just in case one of the Poles knew the Jew was there but hadn't reported it? To the Nazis, it was worth all that killing. At least there was one Pole among the dead who knew and didn't tell.
Serve with sauce Perrigo or Bordelaise sauce.
I am lost. I don't know French. I can't even pronounce it. This feels like something in secret code meant to defeat me. It has. I'm not a cook. I want to forget I even opened this book. I want to find something I can make sense of and cook that. Thank you. Thank you. A lot of you know Michael Naranjo. He's a local sculptor. And I've gotten to know him very well writing this. This was inspired by the film documentary made by his daughter called Dream, Touch, Believe. And his daughter's name is Jenna Naranjo Winters, so it was inspired by her film documentary. And I hope you get to see it. If you haven't seen it yet, it's incredible. And I hope it returns to Santa Fe sometime soon. It's called The Blind Sculptor. He went off to Vietnam, just another soldier with no idea what the largest spider in the world was spinning just for him. A Native American from Santa Clara, he already knew how to hunt with a gun, already knew how to deal with a trap, but this one blindsided him. An ambush, the encroaching web. An enemy hand grenade exploded, taking the use of his right arm and hand and taking his eyes. Michael Naranjo, a man of the Pueblo with early dreams of being a sculptor, now a man without eyes. Now the spider's prey. He had the use of 2 fingers on his left hand, fortunately his dominant hand, but 2 fingers nevertheless. In the hospital, a volunteer, unaware of her role to play, asked what the new blind man wanted. A voice within Michael joined a voice from childhood memory, whispering as one, "Clay. Clay." She brought it. It felt good. He savored its feel as he caressed it into shapes. The clay was warm as the family of potters who raised him, warm as his ancestors dreamed that someone like him would one day come, warm as the earth itself. His fingers would not stop until they made for him a small wonder, an inchworm. Once he had that, he knew he could do anything with clay, with time, with a drive he would hardly need to feed, and with achievement that would go on to quiet all those doubters. If a simple inchworm could form a cocoon deep in forest leaves, then take flight as a moth, so could he. A moth with delicate wings of gray brightening into orange, fading again into diaphanous shades of delicate blue-gray fades. Colors that careful eyes could marvel at, colors he could no longer see. His fingers would become a doorway leading him past the distractions of color, to the power of form, to the seat of deep internal sounds, past the seat of sight, deep and far within, to insight, to foresight. Taking in the inchworm he created back then, could he possibly have known the blessed curse the spider had bestowed? Could Michael ever have guessed that years later his wife Lori would send the crucifix he sculpted as a gift to the Pope, who would then allow the blind sculptor to feel Michelangelo's glorious giant, the 18-foot David, with no glove to mar his touch, on a scaffolding built and assembled just for him? There he was, guided by what seemed a divine hand, climbing step by careful step, to derive from David's marble skin the answer of how fingers could learn to see. And later, much later, he would be granted the right, thanks to his devoted wife, to feel, inch by gloveless inch, a favorite of his, Fraser's End of the Trail. Ah, there they were, Lori leading, describing for him the enormity of its presence, obvious for those with eyes, but not so obvious for him. She was moved, knowing full well how he'd be moved once his hands felt that sad and tired Indian warrior sitting upon his sad and tired horse. Michael walked toward the statue, climbed the scaffolding, rider over rider, his fingers roaming surface to surface, curve to curve, to the Indian's drooping shoulders, to his limp and downward pointing spear. A warrior, taking in some loss, some final end. What loss? What end? The mystery resounds through Michael's fingertips to his finely tuned internal ear that perhaps could hear the sounds of war, of defeat, of heartbreak at forced migration from his beloved ancestral land, or some other shattering, devastating end. Did Michael, an old man now, shudder under the weight of the parallel that he too was an Indian warrior? That he too may one day lose strength to raise his arms, or the nimbleness on which his last usable fingers depend? That one day his trail too will end, as will each of ours? But his works will mark new trails, those eyeless wonders like rows of cottonwoods in winter, haunting and majestic, sculptures of black bronze defying any one color by being the black of every color, sculptures he invites his viewers to touch so they could see them as he sees them, by unfettered feel, generations of hands in touch with earlier unknown hands, So let time chisel away at him as time does to all. Doesn't matter. In Michael, there is no defeat, for he knows how to make do with whatever time allows him to keep. So how could he ever have guessed, lying there in that hospital bed, newly blind, how he as an old man would one day say without pause, if he could choose to live life again, he would wish to live it again blind. Yes. Yes. So look up. I see him there, gloveless and glowing, seeing with hands there in his endless daylit night, climbing beyond sight atop scaffolding of his own construction. God gave him an inch, Michael took a mile, and he did it inch by miraculous inch. My last poem is the last poem in the book. It's called I Think I Once Was a Bird. It has a little story to it that I want to share with you. First of all, I wrote it to get to the bottom of two things. One was my interest in reincarnation. I've always believed in reincarnation. I don't know how or why or how things happen in reincarnation, but I have always instinctively felt that it was something that was real. And I wanted to get to the bottom of my feeling of it. And the second thing I wanted to get to the bottom of is my sort of claustrophobia. I don't know why I have a physical claustrophobia. It's not major, but I do like to sit at the aisle in a movie. I don't like being in an airplane. And then I started to wonder if my physical claustrophobia was just symbolic of a more interesting spiritual claustrophobia. And so that's what generated this poem. I read this poem to my friend Steve Wessler, to whom it is dedicated. Just before he died, he knew he was going to die, and it was planned ahead of time. And I read him a whole bunch of poems, some of mine, some by other people. And I asked him which poem he'd like me to read at his memorial. And he asked me to read this one. So it's very special to me. For that reason, I did read it at his celebration. So I'll read this, and this is the last poem of the book that I'd like to share with you today. I may share another poem, but this is the last one in the book. I think I once was a bird, a small brown one, gray-bellied, a lone song sparrow really, so easy to miss. There are times I can still feel what it was like, swooping, gliding, defying borders, flying high, but well below the thrilling height of the flight of those eye-arresting, majestic ones. But that sparrow died and I returned. A prisoner of this body, this shell, this cage, suffering claustrophobia from having too good a memory of bright air and a profound inability to tolerate the cramped cell that holds my body's bountiful impatience. I now think of death not as termination or extermination or even another kind of incarceration, but rather as liberation. When this singing thing within is free to fly again. Oh, I won't look back with longing as I pass. I will catch the breath of my old friend, the wind, climbing, soaring higher and higher, singing until I'm finally, fully and gleefully gone. For now, so, that ends the sort of formal part of my Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.